something I've been watching, some of the world has been watching, is the defamation trial brought by Johnny Depp against Amber Heard.
Hmm.
Have you gotten a chance to watch any of it?
I haven't watched it, but I've read some reports of it.
What's your analysis on this particular dynamic? We talked about toxicity in the space of agency and communion. What do you make of this relationship that's presented to the world in its raw form?
I don't have strong opinions on it. I think in this stage in the trial, we've heard from him primarily.
Yes, we have not, and we should say for people listening, in case this is published a little bit later, we have not heard from Amber Heard.
Right. Not heard from Heard.
If we heard from Heard, we're doing that. That's going to be happening this week.
I don't know. I think that I've seen, and this is another topic that I have studied, is intimate partner violence and some of the nastier stuff that goes on within relationships. And I think that when this nasty stuff happens, sometimes it's asymmetrical, but sometimes it's symmetrical in the sense that they get into these downward spirals where one is insulting the other, or even with physical violence, one starts pushing the other, shoving the other, hitting the other, and then the other hits back. And so you get into these cycles. And so coming at one point in time, in this case of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, years later, and trying to disentangle what actually went on in their relationship, I don't feel qualified even to do that.
Well, it's fascinating to see. So first, I mean, I have a lot of opinions, particularly because I'm just a fan of Johnny Depp as a person, and a fan of Johnny Depp, the actor, and the kind of characters he created. The person, because maybe this is fiction, maybe this is reality, but they tend to rhyme and mirror each other. But his fascination with Hunter S. Thompson, and there's some aspect of him taking on the Hunter S. Thompson personality, where there's this layers upon layers of wit and humor, and also anxiety and darkness with the drug use and all that kind of stuff. So it's very human, very real person. And so you get to, one of the beautiful things about this trial is you get to basically have a long form podcast and you get to reveal the complexity of this human, the humor under pressure, under stress, but also just the rawness of love, the things that love makes you do, or whatever that is, whatever the things that keeps us in relationships that are toxic, in that turmoil, the hope, the self-delusion, the push and pull of longing and fights, and the ups and downs, whatever
the roller coaster,
of it,
the makeup sex,
exactly. Is and the questions arise whether that's the feature or a bug. Like, why are we drawn to that? You mentioned in mate selection, for long-term mate selection, I think you said women, but I think maybe both don't want a kind of, you had scientific and eloquent words to use, but basically crazy people. You want somebody who's stable,
emotionally unstable. Yeah. So,
but here it seems like maybe we're drawn to that still, like flies to the light.
Right. Well, it can be addictive, but it's not good for long-term relationships. I mean, that characteristic, and there is a stable personality characteristic. It goes under different names: anxiety, neuroticism, emotional lability, etc. But that's the single personality characteristic that is most predictive of breakups and divorces. And in studies that I've done, predictive of conflict in couples. People who are emotionally unstable, they just get into a lot of conflict with their partner. They create havoc. And they can be exciting, but bad for long-term happiness.
They seek conflict in order to attain intimacy. So conflict creates attention.
Yeah.
And it if you take intimacy broadly, it's intimate because
Well,
you're like raw, fragile. You're right there.
yeah. Well,
Like,
and I mean, there's one hypothesis that was put forward by an Israeli biologist named Amos Zahavi called the testing of a bond. And so he asked the question like, why do people inflict costs on their partner? Like even like kissing,
yes,
you're introducing, you know, it's a disease vector. You know, why do people do these weird things? Um, Inflicting costs or emotional liability is a way of inflicting costs. And what he argues is it's the testing of a bond. If the person's willing to tolerate, you know, this level of stress, this level of cost imposition, then that means they must be very committed to me. And so, and I think that's something people do in romantic relationships is they do test the strength of the bond. They test the commitment of the person, and I think I think that's a feature, not a bug, in the sense that um, you, especially in the early stages of love, romantic love, we tend to overly romanticize and idealize our partner. So when there's an absence of evidence, we impute positive values. And and this is one of my recommendations to friends that I know is if you're really considering a good long-term commitment to this person, go on vacation with them. Ideally to a foreign country where both
yeah.
of you are unfamiliar.
Oh, I love it. Road
And
trip or something like that.
yeah, so where you experience unexpected things, stresses, you get a flat tire or whatever, and you encounter, and you see how the person deals with stress, and you see how you deal with each other under stress. And I think that's unless you have put stress tests on relationships, you really don't know where things stand.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. I'm a huge fan of that, like road trip, and not just late in a relationship, like day one.
Yeah.
Road trip, not day one, day -1 before it even happens. To see stress test, because it makes everybody better. It creates intimacy, or it creates or it destroys. But on the Johnny Depp, so they both suffered childhood abuse. The one of the things that I took away from the trial for me was just educational. I don't get to see inside, as most of us maybe don't, like toxic relationships or fights and so on. A lot of things that people maybe do inside relationships, and we don't get to see it presented in such a raw way. So, well, one of the things I learned is that, in terms of partner violence, a woman too can be violent.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that to me, so emotionally and physically violent, that um I almost don't want to, Amber Heard. I mean, there's no limit to my dislike for that person in particular, because clearly, to me at least, I stand with Johnny Depp. To me, that guy is full of love, and but full of demons because he's drawn to whatever the chaos that's created there. But also, it's just an education for me that I tend to associate sort of men with violence and toxicity and destruction inside relationships, but it was interesting to see that women too can be like directly violent,
Yeah.
and men too, which was also surprising to me, have the capacity to stay in such a relationship and to not walk away, which is what I thought is in terms of toxic, violent relationships. I thought
yeah.
there's a male figure who will do emotional and physical, mostly physical violence, and then kind of manipulate the mind of the female to stay in the relationship. But that dynamic can go both ways.
Yeah, it does go both ways. And I think even the emotional abuse is sometimes even worse than the physical abuse. I mean, you see that in studies of even like childhood abuse, where it's the emotional abuse that is the most damaging.
What about the role of jealousy? Something you
Yeah.
also written about in a relationship. Is that a feature or a bug? You started to speak about it, but is it good to be jealous of your partner inside of a relationship? How does it go wrong? How the pros and cons?
So I've written a whole book on this called "The Dangerous Passion: Why Jealousy is as Necessary as Sex and Love." And I think that one cut at your question is that a moderate. So first of all, I think it's a feature, not a bug, in most cases. So in the sense that you have to have an adaptation that is sensitive to threats to a valued relationship. Okay, because, and I think I alluded to this earlier, that just because you're in a relationship and you're in a relationship with a desirable partner doesn't mean that you've finished solving the problems of mating that you need to solve, because there are threats from the outside. So mate poachers, people who try to lure your partner away for either a sexual encounter or a more committed romantic relationship. And then there's also dissatisfaction within the relationship. So your partner might become tempted to be sexually unfaithful or romantically unfaithful or emotionally unfaithful. And so we need humans, with the evolution of long-term pair bonding, we need adaptations to guard the relationship and be sensitive to threats to the relationship. And I think jealousy is one of those. I think it's a key one. And now that I think that there are a variety of benefits to it, but also a variety of costs or downsides to jealousy, because we know that jealousy, male sexual jealousy, is the leading cause of spousal abuse and spousal violence, physical violence, probably emotional violence as well, or psychological violence. And so that's why I call it the dangerous passion. It's a necessary emotion, but it is also a dangerous emotion. Leads to homicide. Leads to and I've studied also homicidal ideation, which intersects with this topic, in that men, sometimes women to a lesser degree, develop homicidal ideation about people who are trying to poach their mates, or who do poach their mates, successfully poach their mates. So what jealousy does is it alerts you to a threat to the relationship, and it motivates checking out the source of the threat. How threatening is this? So people tend to increase vigilance of their partner. In the modern world, it includes hacking into their cell phone or computer, monitoring them, sometimes stalking them, but also can include positive things. So it might be that, so one trigger of jealousy is a direct threat to the relationship. But there's another more subtle trigger of jealousy, which is a mate value discrepancy. So usually when people mate, they assort or pair up on overall mate value. So in the American 10-point scale, the 8s tend to pair up with the 8s, the 6s with the 6s, the 10s with the 10s, and the 1s with the 1s.
American, is there other scales?
I
I wonder if the numerical systems, well, there's a binary. I just go with the binary 0, 1. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
I know.
Yeah.
The 8s pairs with the 8s, 7s. With the 7s.
Yeah. So in general, but there are errors in mate selection. You kind of alluded to that issue earlier, that sometimes people make errors in mate selection, which they do. So sometimes you think this person is well matched on mate value, but they're not. But then things change. So let's say they're the same. You have 2 6s, and then all of a sudden the woman's career takes off. All of a sudden she's getting promotion. She's acquiring wealth. She's attracting men who are of a different mate value than she previously did. Well, that triggers jealousy in the guy, even if she swears she's going to be totally loyal and she has no signs of leaving or no signs of infidelity. A mate value discrepancy is going to trigger jealousy. Now, what can it do? Well, it can do, in the broadest sense, people can do 2 classes of things. They can do cost-inflicting things or benefit-providing things. So the man in that situation might say, okay, I need to devote more attention to my partner. I need to up my game when it comes to resource acquisition. I need to lavish more attention and gifts on her. And so there's a whole suite of benefit provisioning things that can help to reduce that mate value discrepancy. And then there's also cost inflicting things that and humans unfortunately do both sets of things.
Yeah, there's also this maybe that's love. I notice the people I especially love or have a connection to, romantically or otherwise, there's a feeling like I don't deserve you. So with friends, with so on, like, I mean, tend to think that about almost everything, which is why it's a strong signal when I don't feel it that way, which is like, how lucky am I to have this? And that's a weird illusion of inflation of value or something. Like, I think that the positive effect of that is motivates me to be better. I guess on this 1 to 10 scale to be higher, and you just sort of kind of have to either, like, it's a nice feature that your mind sees others that you have affection towards as higher value, and it forces you to have that. Like, I'm a person that experiences jealousy, and that forces me to be better.
Yeah,
I get my shit together.
yeah. Well, and I think that the sometimes the best relationships are when both people feel lucky to be with the other person.
Yes, exactly. It's balanced that way. And then that's when you, in terms of jobs, in terms of going to the gym, all those kinds of things. And so a little bit of jealousy. I have discussion with those people. I always wonder, there's people in relationships where, like, no, they never experience jealousy. I wonder what that's like, because they're very successful relationships, but and I always wonder, I'm currently single, so I'm always doubt that I know what the hell I'm doing at all. But I'm definitely somebody that experiences jealousy and kind of enjoys jealousy, like a little bit of like missing. To me, that's like you're missing the other person.
Yeah. Well,
you're longing for the other person.
And here's another interesting wrinkle that I also talk about in the book is sometimes people intentionally evoke jealousy in their partner. And I think that's also a kind of testing of a bond kind of issue.
Yeah.
So, and especially women, but I think both sexes interpret a total absence of jealousy as a sign that their partner is not sufficiently committed to them or sufficiently in love with them. So if you, like, just say, I don't know, if you go to a party with your partner and then you leave the room for some reason, you come back and your partner is passionately kissing someone else and doesn't bother you at all.
Yeah.
That might be a cue to the partner that, well, maybe you're not very in love with that person or not very committed to them.